Hello everyone, I'm Matt Mitrovich, the alternate historian. It's time to do a plausibility review on what's perhaps the most famous alternate history anime of all times, Code Geass. Now, I wouldn't exactly call myself an anime fan, but I've watched a fair few animes. I've especially enjoyed the giant mecha subgenre, like Macross, also known as Robotech in the States, or the various Gundam series. Thus, when I learned there was a show that combined that with alternate history, I was intrigued. But it's only after I received a Patreon request from Mark Hopkins to review Code Geass that I finally decided to sit down and watch it. Thus, after watching Season 1 of Code Geass and reading up on the in-universe history, I can finally share my thoughts on how plausible Code Geass really is. Before we begin, I should warn you that there may be spoilers. Since this is a plausibility review, I will mostly be focusing on the alternate history of Code Geass and not the plot. But if you don't want to risk it, stop watching this video and go watch Code Geass. Still with me? Okay, let's begin. Code Geass is set in a world split between three superpowers: the racially stratified Holy Britannian Empire, the Socialist Chinese Federation, and the Democratic European Union, also known as the Euro Universe and Europa United. The story takes place right after Britannia conquered Japan in 2010, thanks to their nightmare frames. Unfortunately, Britannia's stay in Japan is not pleasant, and the country has even been renamed Area 11. Ignoring the mecha for a moment, the existence of the three superpowers controlling the world and Japan being renamed Area 11 are likely nods to Orwell's 1984, which I like. Our hero is Lelouch, an exiled Britannian prince who's hiding out in Japan along with his sister Nunnally after his mother was killed. Nunnally witnessed the murder of her mother, which caused her to lose both her sight and ability to walk. This makes it difficult for Lelouch because he must take care of her while staying undercover in a war zone. Things change, however, when Lelouch gets caught up in a terrorist attack and finds a girl called C2, who saves Lelouch's life from the Britannian Royal Guard by giving Lelouch a power known as Geass. This power allows him to command anyone to do whatever he wants, whether bending their will to live, fight, or die on his behalf, though only once and only through direct eye contact. Lelouch decided to use his Geass to find the person who killed his mother, destroy the Britannian Empire, and create a better world for Nunnally. So that's the present of this timeline, but how exactly did we get to that? Well, to find out, we need to jump in our time machine and go back to when history diverged. According to the Code Geass wiki, the anime's point of divergence set somewhere between 43 AD and 55 AD. In our timeline, this was the period where the Roman Empire completed their conquest of Britain, but in the Code Geass timeline, a Celtic king named Alwyn I united the tribes and stopped the Roman invasion. Now, this is honestly an interesting start for an alternate history. Celts as a distinct people group are few and far between in Europe, with only a few regions identifying as Celtic, and even fewer places where the Celtic languages are still widely spoken. Seeing Celtic Britain survive conquest by the Roman Empire and be united as a single entity almost 900 years before it happened in our timeline, in anime of all things, is compelling to say the least. So, of course, then the next major event to discuss in this alternate timeline is Elizabeth I bearing a son named Henry IX who continues the Tudor dynasty. Wait, what? Yeah, despite having a point of divergence in the 1st century, we still have the Virgin Queen herself existing 1500 years at the initial point of divergence, except said queen is no longer a virgin. I have so many questions. What happened to the unified Celtic England? Did the Germanic tribes still invade? Did the Normans invade as well? Did the War of the Roses still happen, allowing the Tudors to come to power in the first place? None of this makes any damn sense, and this acts like another point of divergence entirely. Well, I think it's safe to say that as an alternate history, Code Geass isn't plausible. But let's keep going to see if anything else crazy happens. Okay, so in our timeline, Elizabeth I died childless and thus the throne passed to her cousin, James I, who began the Stuart dynasty. Code Geass, however, changes things by making you forget about the initial point of divergence, and have Queen Elizabeth birth a bastard to reign after she died. Now, I don't know much about the rules of English royal succession in the 17th century, but I have to assume that a child born out of wedlock in Christian England would be more likely given the Executioner's Axe before being given the crown. In fact, such an event could have led to a violent rebellion against the Queen, rather than ushering in some sort of golden age of the Tudor dynasty that Code Geass would have you believe. But if I can be frank, the next event in the Code Geass timeline is even crazier. Alright, so despite having a Celtic king stop the Romans, you still have Queen Elizabeth existing. And not only does Queen Elizabeth exist, she gives birth to a child, a son, who continues the Tudor dynasty. And with these events in mind, obviously the next thing to happen on schedule would be the American Revolution. And as you can probably guess, the Revolution is another point of divergence with the Americans losing the Revolutionary War. How do you ask? Well, America lost the Revolutionary War because the Britannians bribed Benjamin Franklin to join the Loyalists, leading to an American defeat at Yorktown where George Washington dies. Where do I even begin? For those who don't know, Benjamin Franklin was one of America's founding fathers. Sort of Renaissance man, Franklin was an author, printer, political theorist, politician, Freemason, postmaster, scientist, inventor, civic activist, statesman, and diplomat. He was also an early supporter of unity between the colonies and spearheaded the effort to oppose taxes levied on the colonies by the British government. He was a member of the Continental Congress and was part of the committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence. Later, he was appointed ambassador to France, and thanks in part to his efforts, secured a military alliance with France that led to the nation's direct support of American independence. The idea that this revolutionary could be simply bribed is, in short, ridiculous. But do you want another reason why this is silly? Benjamin had a son named William, who was governor of New Jersey. William Franklin refused to join the rebels and was imprisoned in 1776, and Benjamin did nothing. In fact, father and son never spoke again until 1785. Thus, this is not the man you want being a turncoat as one of your major points of divergence. Sure, you can argue that this isn't the same Franklin we know from our timeline because of the aforementioned points of divergence, but I would counter by saying that Benjamin Franklin shouldn't exist in the first place. So why name this important historical person the same name as one of America's most influential world leaders? I'm now going to breeze through the rest of Code Geass's alternate history because, to be honest, it's not that important. The French Revolution still happened on schedule for some reason, and even Napoleon comes to power, although he appears to be conquering less for himself and more for the European Union. He's more successful in this timeline, winning the Battle of Trafalgar, because that is the only spot in the ocean where Napoleon is allowed to win naval battles that can change the course of a war. He also manages to invade Britain, forcing Queen Elizabeth III, no idea what happened to Liz II, to pull a royal exile to the American colonies. Napoleon, however, still loses at Waterloo because of course he does. Meanwhile, Elizabeth III is succeeded to the throne of Britannia by Sir Ricardo von Britannia, and there is mention of a North-South War, which has to be this timeline's version of the American Civil War, because I can never escape it. Meanwhile, a World War I-esque conflict erupted in Europe in the early 20th century because the writers continue to lack creativity, and Japan loses a big war in the 1940s, although to who is unclear, and at this point I stopped caring. Also, at some point, China and India unite to a single country because that makes sense to someone who knows nothing about the cultures or history of either nation. So we now find ourselves back in the present. And guys, this timeline's bad. The creators completely ignored cause and effect when they changed history. Worse, they couldn't even really agree on a single point of divergence to begin with. In my mind, they should have just stuck with America losing the Revolutionary War and not try to shoehorn in a unified Celtic Britain or an extended Tudor dynasty. The three superpowers are just space-filling empires rather than fleshed-out states. Worse, Code Geass spends too much time paralleling our own history by repeating famous events or showcasing cameos from famous people, just like how every bad mainstream alternate history does, rather than creating a plausible alternate history. It's like casting a film with a bunch of well-known actors and actresses who are obviously not right for the roles, but the film's producers don't care because they just want the name recognition they bring to the audience. So if it isn't apparent to you now, I will say it again. Code Geass isn't plausible. I didn't even need to comment on the giant robots or Geass magic to prove my point. That said, it's still worth a watch? Well, to be honest, the show itself is pretty good. The alternate history elements have a minimal impact on the overall plot, so it doesn't distract from the story. I enjoy the conflicting ideals about reforming corrupt, oppressive systems, such as whether it's better to try and change it from the inside or destroy it from the outside. Plus, the main characters were developed and the action scenes were good. Admittedly, I could have done without the over-the-top high school drama and the underage nudity, but thankfully there isn't much of either. If you like anime, then I recommend checking out Code Geass. Just try not to be too upset by the lack of plausibility. Well, that was all to say on the subject. If you like what I do, please comment, subscribe, share this video, support me on Patreon. Also, stay tuned after our credits for an announcement of another book giveaway. I'm Matt Mitrich, the alternate historian. Bye. Hello again, everyone. I found myself with an extra copy of Gregory Benford's The Berlin Project. If you'd like to win a copy and live in the United States, then comment on this video with your favorite alternate history anime and why you like it. The comment I like the best will win the book. Thanks again for watching, everybody.